Very dramatic scene here just off southbound I-97 and Route 50. Take a look. You can see the plane is still on the ground here. Moments ago, a tow truck arriving to begin removing it here off of the shoulder. Now, what we do know is that 3 people were on board this plane, 1 adult and 2 children. Amazingly, no reported injuries at this time. What we do know from Maryland State Police is that a pilot reported losing power in his engine and made a successful emergency landing here near I-97 and Route 50. Now, we do know just from looking at the flight tracker that this plane was leaving and heading towards Tipton Airfield in Fort Meade about 30 minutes from this scene. But again, 3 people on board this plane, 1 adult, 2 children. Again, no reported injuries at this time. People are able to move at least this portion of the road that we can see here. And again, as I told you, a tow truck has arrived here to begin cleanup. We do know that the FAA and the NTSB has been called out to begin their investigation of this crash. We're also told that Hazmat was on scene here investigating a small fuel leak here. Again, a very fluid situation and developing. We will be on the ground here bringing you more updates as they become available. For now, George Solis reporting live. Back to you. Jess, still somewhat of an active scene out here. I'm going to step out of the shot so you can see that plane has now been removed from the guardrail where it crashed, and it is now on the back of a tow truck. The NTSB and the FAA have been called out to investigate this crash. Now, what we do know from the video that we'll show you now where this plane was about an hour ago is that the pilot took off from Fort Meade in Tipton Airfield about half an hour from here. The pilot reportedly lost power, reported having mechanical issues with his engine, and then had to make an emergency landing here at this guardrail. Amazingly, there were no reported injuries. There was 1 adult and 2 children on board this flight, we're told by police. No cars were impacted in this crash. But again, that guardrail did receive the brunt of that plane's crash. Now, we do know that Hazmat was called out to the scene to inspect a fuel leak, but we don't know anything beyond that at this point, if that was cleaned up or if that has presented any other problems. But again, we do know that this plane left Tipton Airfield about 3 o'clock this afternoon. It's been flying in and out of that airport over the last 2 days, according to flight tracking that we looked in. And again, the pilot reported mechanical failure with his engine, which forced him to have a forced landing here at the guardrail. Again, miraculously, there were no injuries reported in this crash. That is the very latest. We'll send it back to you.
George, thanks.
Good evening, Denise. That plane was removed from the scene here about half an hour ago. Maryland State Police tweeting that the ramp here at Route 50 and Route 655 has been reopened. Traffic now moving smoothly. Now, what we do know, according to Maryland State Police, is that the plane left Tipton Airfield in Fort Meade about half an hour from this location, where the pilot then reported mechanical trouble and had to make an emergency landing here off the shoulder. Amazingly, no reported injuries. As you mentioned, there was 1 person on board that flight, the pilot and 2 other children. Again, they were all able to walk away with no injuries, no cars either involved as that plane made that emergency landing here. That guardrail, however, did receive the brunt of the impact. Now, Maryland State Police is leading the investigation at this time. Now, the FAA and the NTSB have been called in also to investigate the crash. But again, about half an hour ago, since that plane was removed from the scene here, and Maryland State Police, we're told again, is leading that investigation. We are still gathering more details. Maryland State Police say they will release more information as it becomes available. But again, just miraculous that there were no reported injuries in this small plane crash. For now, we are live in Annapolis. George Solis reporting for WJZ. Good evening, Mary. We now know the name of that pilot. He's 32 years old, Christopher Curry of Odenton. Amazingly, he was able to land that plane near a busy highway without crashing into any cars. Chopper 13 over the dramatic scene in Anne Arundel County.
Airplane accident 97 south, Route 50 east. Advise that plane crashed into the woods.
Small plane partially in pieces resting in a wooded area near the busy ramp on eastbound Route 50. Swarms of police and fire crews surrounding the aircraft, authorities say, was occupied by a lone pilot and his 2 young sons. Amazingly, none were injured in the wreck.
The adult pilot and 2 children passengers appear to be Ocean King. We have an EMT on scene checking them out.
According to authorities, the pilot flew out of Tipton Airport here in Fort Meade and was on his way back but then reported having engine troubles. The preliminary investigation noting that the pilot, identified as 32-year-old Christopher Curry, began losing RPMs and noticed smoke coming from the engine compartment. Curry made the decision to make an emergency landing and somehow was able to avoid the rush hour traffic, only striking a light pole and guardrail. Those in the area who later saw evidence of the wreck grateful no lives were lost, especially during a week where another plane crash made national headlines.
After the Roy Halladay, plane crash, obviously this is disturbing, and but really glad everybody's safe this time, and especially with kids.
A lot of times these things are resulting in death, and just looking at that plane and the damage to the plane, it kind of indicates that, they're very fortunate.
Maryland State Police, who led the initial crash investigation, say they will not speculate on the cause, noting the crash will be investigated by federal authorities. Now, both the FAA and the National Transportation Safety Board have been called in to investigate the crash. Live in Anne Arundel County tonight, George Solis reporting for WJZ.
George.